Far from the light of any sun, at the edge of known space, the Volari Armada drifted helplessly through the shadows of a silent storm. They had ventured into a region known for its unstable subspace rifts, confident in their advanced systems and centuries of navigational superiority. But nature proved cruelly unpredictable. Without warning, a massive gravitational anomaly opened like a cosmic trap, pulling their 200 ship fleet into a zone where normal space twisted and bent. Engines sputtered and failed. Communication relays shorted out, and power cores began draining faster than backup systems could compensate. Isolated, disoriented, and cut off from the rest of their empire, the Volari found themselves at the mercy of space itself. The Volari were a proud species, cold in diplomacy and precise in all things. Asking for help was not part of their nature. Their culture taught that weakness invited conquest, and so for 3 long days they tried to fix their failures in silence. But the storm only grew worse, and ships began to report life support failures and critical systems on the verge of collapse. Finally, under pressure from younger officers and the desperate cries of crews trapped in powerless vessels, Fleet Commander Threx Valoon gave the order no Valari leader had given in over a century: send a distress signal. The message was brief, clinical, and sent on all emergency frequencies. A whisper in the void meant more to satisfy protocol than to truly expect an answer. But that answer came. Roughly 14 hours after the signal left the dying fleet, a small vessel appeared on the outer edge of the anomaly. It was no warship, nor a sleek science cruiser. It was a human salvage vessel, marked by paint, faded from solar wind, and hull plates repaired with mismatched parts. Its name, Courageous Dawn, was stamped proudly on the side. Inside, a crew of just 17 humans received the Volari distress call, and without hesitation, turned their ship toward the dying armada. The Volari first believed the humans were scavengers. Their scanners picked up low-powered engines and patchwork shielding, and their long-held biases made them assume these newcomers had arrived to strip the broken fleet for spare parts. Defensive systems were activated, warnings sent, but the humans never flinched. Instead of threats, they sent blueprints. Instead of demands, they offered help. Captain Mara Ellison, leader of the Courageous Dawn, opened a direct channel with the Volari flagship and calmly explained that her crew belonged to the Interstellar Relief Corps, a young but growing Earth initiative built not for war, but to help others in space. Her voice was steady, her offer clear: assistance, no charge. Commander Valoon was stunned. His officers whispered about deception and hidden motives, yet no sign of aggression came from the human vessel. Instead, human engineers in pressure suits began docking with Volari ships in small teams, carrying tools and fusion batteries on their backs. They patched life support, restarted failing reactors, and even gave away their own food rations to Volari crews. One human was seen using duct tape, an unknown material to the Volari, to seal a cracked coolant pipe, and it worked. The Volari watched, confused and wary, as these strange visitors worked without complaint, laughed while they toiled, and asked for nothing in return. For the first time, the Volari encountered a species that offered kindness without condition, and it unsettled them. What kind of people flew into a storm to save strangers? What did they stand to gain? The questions hung heavy in the minds of the Valari, but the courageous Dawn never paused to explain. They simply kept helping, one ship at a time, and somewhere in the darkness between stars, something in the galaxy quietly shifted. Captain Mara Ellison stood at the center of the courageous Dawn's modest command deck, coordinating efforts with the towering and sharp-voiced Commander Threx Valun of the Valari flagship. Though vastly different in species and culture, the two captains were now bound by a silent urgency, the survival of a stranded fleet. Every day, Mara and her small human crew worked across the broken Valari vessels, patching power lines, rebooting failing reactor cores, and recharging life support systems, while the Valari watched in quiet confusion. In the galaxy known to the Velari, help always came with a price. Empires negotiated, alliances demanded loyalty. Even their own people would never assist without expecting something in return. Yet here were these humans, less advanced, physically weaker, far fewer in number, offering their strength and supplies freely. Valyun, a commander trained to see through political tricks, could not understand it. At first, he kept his guard high, suspecting a hidden deal or a delayed demand. But the days passed, and no hidden price came. Instead, the humans gave more: energy, packs, food packets, even their water reserves. They smiled while they worked, made light conversation with curious Valari, and fixed systems that others would have abandoned. The crew of the Courageous Dawn sang old Earth songs while sealing hull fractures, their voices echoing through the hollow corridors of disabled ships. They brewed strange-smelling drinks they called coffee, and even shared cups with curious Valari technicians who had never tasted anything like it. These simple, human habits, laughing, storytelling, singing, felt almost alien to the Valari, who had grown up in a culture of silence, formality, and control. One Valari engineer, young and quietly observant, followed a pair of human mechanics into a failing frigate where a vital life support unit was broken beyond normal repair. The humans examined it, nodded to each other, and with a surprising mix of creativity and calm, began constructing a replacement using spare metal scraps, tubing, and a shiny gray strip they called duct tape. They worked without blueprints, relying on instinct and experience, cracking jokes in between warnings to hold something steady. The engineer, fascinated, recorded the process on a personal data pad and later uploaded the clip to a private Valari forum, thinking nothing of it. But within hours, the video spread like wildfire across the Valari network. Officers, technicians, and even high-ranking strategists viewed the footage with disbelief. The idea that humans, supposedly primitive, could improvise a working life support system out of scraps was shocking enough. That they did it with laughter and without asking for payment left an even deeper mark. The term duct tape diplomacy emerged almost overnight, becoming a symbol of this strange, generous species that fixed machines and offered friendship with the same steady hands. Valari citizens, isolated in their sleek cities and efficient but cold routines, began asking questions they had never asked before. Who were these humans, really? Why were they here, risking their lives for strangers who would never repay them? Commander Valun, once suspicious, began to lower his formal tone when speaking to Mara, even asking her, one evening, why her people would help those who would not help them in return. Mara smiled and answered simply, because we can. It wasn't strategy, it was choice. This answer left Valyun silent, not because he disagreed, but because something within him shifted, a thought he had never allowed himself to consider. While repairs continued, and the storm around the anomaly slowly settled, the humans kept moving from ship to ship, their tools clanking, their voices humming. With every broken cable they fixed, and every frightened Valari they comforted, they were not just rebuilding a fleet, they were quietly changing the future of two civilizations, and neither side fully understood just how much that mattered. Not yet. Across the stars, news travels faster than ships, faster than sound, faster even than thought, carried by the endless web of transmissions connecting every corner of the galaxy. And it was through this web that word of the humans' actions near the subspace anomaly reached every major power. At first, few believed it. Reports claimed that a single Earth vessel, poorly armed and lightly manned, had ventured into a dangerous zone, not to scavenge or spy, but to rescue one of the most advanced and prideful fleets in the galaxy. Some laughed, calling it a stunt or misinformation. Others scoffed, declaring that humanity's display was not bravery, but foolishness, a sign of weakness in a universe built on power and politics. But then came the recordings, grainy but clear, showing human engineers smiling as they worked inside Valari ships, sharing tools, rations, and songs. One clip showing a Valari child aboard a medical frigate being handed a chocolate bar by a laughing human nurse went viral across thousands of systems. Suddenly, debates erupted in council halls, trading hubs, and backroom chambers. The Interstellar Council, where Earth's seat was barely acknowledged just months before, called an emergency session. Representatives of long-standing species began to ask questions they had never considered. Could these humans, with their strange mix of compassion and improvisation, shift the balance of galactic diplomacy? On Earth, the media exploded with headlines naming the event First Contact 2.0, not because of who humanity met, but because of what it now represented. News anchors, political analysts, and even school children spoke of the courageous dawn and its crew with pride, while analysts predicted the birth of a new era. Yet amid the growing praise, not all hearts were at peace. Back near the anomaly, hidden tensions boiled beneath the surface. Among the Valari fleet, where tradition and honor were taught above all else, a group of soldiers, ashamed of their people's reliance on human aid, decided to take matters into their own hands. Late one cycle, under the cover of a system reboot, they snuck aboard a human supply shuttle, docked to a support ship, and sabotaged its stabilizers and cooling systems. The shuttle, carrying water filters and emergency fuel cells, spun out of control shortly after detaching, crashing into a nearby asteroid cluster. No lives were lost, but the damage was clear. When word reached Captain Mara Ellison, her crew was furious. Some called for a full retreat, others for punishment. But Mara stood silent for a long moment, her expression unreadable. She knew retaliation would be easy, justified even, but it would break everything her team had worked for. So instead, she called for a meeting with Commander Threx Valoon, and in front of both crews, she spoke calmly and firmly. She would not pull back her help. She would not let one action define two entire peoples. If we abandon each other at the first wound, she said, then peace was never real to begin with. Her words stunned the Valari more than any threat ever could. Valoon, shaken and ashamed, ordered the rogue soldiers arrested and personally apologized. That moment, when a human chose understanding over revenge, echoed through the Valari ranks like a silent quake. The idea that strength could mean patience, that honor could come from mercy, was new to them. Officers who had once looked down on the humans now nodded in quiet respect. Engineers who had doubted now offered to help. A bridge had been built, not by weapons or treaties, but by choice. And though the galaxy watched with different opinions, some in fear, others in awe, it was clear that something had changed. In a corner of deep space, where once only cold survival mattered, a small ship called Courageous Dawn had lit a flame brighter than any star. The stars beyond the Villari fleet had barely begun to shine again when a new alert shattered the calm. Another wave of spatial turbulence was forming, larger and faster than the first, threatening to sweep through the region with enough force to crush even the strongest ships caught in its path. This second wave had been hidden behind the first anomaly, and its sudden emergence gave the fleet little time to react. Though repairs were nearly finished and many ships had regained partial power, several Villari vessels, especially the older and more heavily damaged ones, remained too weak to escape on their own. The countdown to disaster had begun, and the humans aboard Courageous Dawn knew what it meant. Captain Mara Ellison studied the readings with a grim face. Her ship, though small and underpowered compared to the Villari giants, still had one last card to play: its gravity anchors, normally used to stabilize the ship near asteroid belts or debris fields. The anchors could, in theory, be modified to project a temporary stabilization field strong enough to delay the wave's advance. The science was uncertain, the risk was high. Using the anchors at full power in such unstable space could overload the core and tear the Courageous Dawn apart. But Mara did not hesitate. While her crew looked at her, waiting for orders, she simply said, "If we can give them even 5 more minutes, we do it." There was no debate. With quiet determination, the humans began reconfiguring systems, rerouting energy, and preparing to anchor themselves in the heart of a collapsing storm. As Villari commanders scrambled to evacuate their weakest ships, Mara contacted Commander Threx Valoon one last time, sharing the plan. He objected immediately, warning that it was suicide, but she cut through his protests with a calm reply: "This is who we are." That silence, brief, heavy, was all the answer she needed. The Courageous Dawn moved into position at the edge of the Villari formation, deploying its anchors and firing stabilizer pulses into the growing turbulence. The effect was instant and dramatic. Space itself seemed to hold still for a few precious moments. Villari ships that would have been lost powered up and began to pull away. But inside the Courageous Dawn Warning lights flared red as systems began to fail, one by one. The stabilizers held, but the ship's core was overheating. Fires broke out on two decks. The hull groaned under pressure. With no time left, Mara gave the final order to evacuate. Escape pods launched into the rising chaos, carrying her crew into the unknown void. Just as the main reactor reached critical levels, the last image sent from the Courageous Dawn was a burst of static and light, then silence. When the wave finally passed and the stars returned, the Villari found themselves alone, except for a cluster of escape pods drifting near the wreckage. Villari rescue ships moved in immediately, scanning the area and pulling in the pods one by one. Inside, they found the human crew, injured, shaken, but alive. No longer were they seen as mere helpers or curious outsiders. As each pod was opened and the humans were brought aboard, the Villari received them not with distance or formality, but with quiet reverence. Word of their sacrifice spread through the fleet like wildfire. Villari officers who had once doubted humanity now stood in silence as their crews tended to the wounded humans with care. Commander Valoon himself walked into the medical bay where Mara rested, bowed his head, and said only, "You did more than save us. You changed us." No further words were needed. For the Villari, honor had always been tied to victory and strength. But now they had witnessed a new kind of honor, one born from a selfless courage and unwavering kindness. Among stars that had seen endless wars and ancient rivalries, a small Earth ship had burned briefly, beautifully, and in doing so, lit a path forward that no one could ignore. Weeks had passed since the Courageous Dawn vanished into the storm, but its memory had not faded. Instead, it had spread across the stars like a quiet fire in the cold dark, igniting conversations, rewriting beliefs, and stirring something deep in the heart of the galaxy. On Villari Prime, a world once known for its pride and emotional distance, a high-level delegation stood before the Earth Council in Geneva, not with guarded diplomacy or rehearsed superiority, but with an offer never before extended to any species deemed technologically or culturally lesser. It was not a treaty of trade or a request for protection. It was an alliance of equals, honest, humble, and free of conditions. The Villari spokesperson, a senior diplomat who had once questioned humanity's relevance, spoke plainly. "You gave us more than help. You gave us something we never knew we were missing." On Earth, the announcement swept across nations and colonies like a tidal wave of hope. For a species that had spent generations reaching for the stars without knowing who would answer, the recognition carried more weight than any conquest ever could. Suddenly, the story of the Courageous Dawn was everywhere. Holoscreens replayed the final message sent by Captain Mara Ellison. Books were written, and documentaries streamed across networks. In Villari academies, a new section of military training was added, not about strategy or weapons, but about ethics, decision making, and a course titled Human Response Under Pressure, where cadets studied not only how to fight, but when not to. One quote from Mara was printed above the main entrance. "Sometimes, the strongest choice is the one that risks everything for someone else." Across both Earth and Villari cities, monuments were raised in honor of the crew, not towering statues of warriors, but graceful structures of light and stone, symbolizing unity in chaos. At one monument on Earth, visitors could see a life-sized model of the courageous Dawn, complete with the names of all 17 crew members etched into the side. Valari children left crystals at the base. Human children left flowers. Somewhere in a classroom on Valari Prime, a young student reading from her digital textbook looked up and repeated a line her teacher had just read aloud. Humans are strange, she said softly, thinking it over. They help without asking. They give without counting. And if they bleed, it is not for power, but for each other. The classroom was silent for a moment, and then the teacher smiled. That is why we call them brothers now. Elsewhere in the galaxy, diplomats from other empires began rethinking their stance on humanity. No longer seen as inexperienced newcomers, humans were now viewed with both curiosity and caution, not for their ships or weapons, but for the unpredictable power of their compassion. Unlike machines, it could not be measured. Unlike politics, it could not be predicted. It was a force of its own, quiet and steady, and it had proven stronger than fear, faster than self-interest, and more lasting than pride. Captain Mara Ellison and her crew returned to Earth to a hero's welcome, but none of them saw themselves as heroes. When asked by a reporter what she thought of changing galactic history, Mara simply replied, "We didn't mean to change history. We just didn't want anyone to be left behind." That simple answer, like so many others in the human story, said more than all the speeches and council votes combined. The legacy of the courageous Dawn was not carved in stone or sealed in documents. It lived on in the way other species looked at Earth, and in the way Earth had finally found its place, not above others or beneath them, but beside them, shoulder to shoulder, where it had always hoped to stand.